Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Hey, it's Danny Pellegrino from Everything Iconic. Ready to upgrade your style game without blowing your budget? Check out Quince. They've got all the good stuff, shirts and polos, activewear, and fine leather goods, all at 50 to 80% less than other high-end brands. And the best part? They're all about safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing. Get that luxury vibe without the luxury price tag. Hit up quince.com/upgrade for free shipping and 365-day returns on your next order. That's quince.com/upgrade.
Hello, welcome to this. It is the Eggonomics podcast brought to you by Beardmore & Co, independent financial advisors for all things pensions, investments and financial planning. I am joined today by Mark Evans. We all know Mark by now. If you listen for any length of time, you'll know he's the guru of all things rugby and indeed business. Currently based out of Fiji, running the Drura rugby team. He joins us all the way from that beautiful island. Mark, how are you?
All right. Thank you, JB. Considering we got an absolute toweling in Western Australia at the weekend, which was probably our worst performance of the season, having played extremely well the week before away at the Brumbies in Canberra, which on paper is a much more difficult fixture. But, you know, that's sport, isn't it?
Yeah. What happened, Mark? When you're in charge of a sports team, obviously these things do happen. Do you then immediately run a bit of an inquiry, or do you just let it slip and say, look, it's a rugby thing? And I'm thinking about this, actually, because it happened this weekend with Gloucester. I mean, not to that extent, of course, but what do you do?
It really does depend. Every situation's different, and there is no set answer to it. And also, you've got to be a bit careful in my position. You're not running the team. You know, that's the coach's job. But having said that, you don't react to a single result. Although sometimes individual results are a bit of a watershed or a tipping point, or whichever particular phrase you want to use, or you feel that's as far as that team can go. Now, that's not the situation here because this side is so young. It really is so young, both in terms of games played and chronological age. But there are times when you have to break a team up and rebuild it. And sometimes that's down to the salary cap. Sometimes that's down to the budget. Sometimes it's down to the age profile. You know, and that, of course, is one of the hardest and yet one of the most enjoyable things to do. You know, you do hear not so much in English rugby, but certainly in Australian rugby league, for instance, they'll talk about a team being in a rebuild phase. And you'll get it in American football as well. And those sports have a lot of regulation around them in terms of salary cap levels and squad rosters, number limits, and various other things I won't bore you with. That is fair enough, and people understand that actually, take the AFL, for instance, it's almost impossible, given the draft and the salary cap and the other regulatory elements they've got, for a team to be at the top for a generation. It's virtually impossible. In other sports, Scottish football would be the one I always use, but there are others. One might say German football until this year. You know, there's a very limited number of teams that can win it, and if the team that usually win it doesn't come first, they tend to come second or third. And that's just those leagues are very, very different. You know, when you talk a rebuild there, you're talking about, well, we haven't won a trophy for 3 years. Well, let's obviously what we're doing isn't achieving what we're aiming for. Let's make a change of some kind, probably several. So it really does depend, but it doesn't tend to be on one result. One result just is devastatingly disappointing.
Yeah, well, on rebuilds, we don't talk about it that much in rugby, do we? But there's two teams recently that have rebuilt, and they literally say they've rebuilt, and I didn't really agree with what one of them did, but it was successful. Leicester Tigers went through a very clear and obvious rebuild. It was brutal, actually.
It did.
And probably the team that have handled it much better is Exeter Chiefs this season.
Yeah, I don't think you can say Leicester Tigers handled it badly. They did, after all, win a premiership, which is bloody hard to do.
Yeah, I don't mean it like that, because it is hard to do, and the end result spoke for itself, so they did it well. Why I didn't like it is because I thought a lot of the lads lost jobs when they weren't put in situations to succeed. And what I mean by that is they had lots of young players playing together, and I wonder if they damaged careers by throwing them into the white-hot heat of the Premiership, when if you got that same player and put him in the Leicester Tigers first team, they might have been okay. They might have developed differently.
Well, the counterfactual is always difficult to prove, isn't it?
Yes.
It's coulda, woulda, shoulda, maybe. And the answer is, if you're the head director of rugby or the head coach or the CEO, whoever's doing the list build, which is part of it, and which is what people tend to. That's what they tend to look at when they talk about a rebuild. They tend to look at the list rebuild, in other words, the roster. And certainly those two clubs have undergone, in recent years in the Premiership, a significant rebuild. Leicester Tigers, wouldn't they have gone down 1 year if it hadn't been for Saracens?
Might have gone down 2 years. I mean, they were very, very close. Certainly for 1 year they would.
So I think you've got to say that's a fantastic rebuild. Now, you've got to say Leicester Tigers have got the resources to rebuild. That's an important point, by the way. If you haven't got the resources, rebuilding is virtually impossible.
Yeah. I mean, Leicester Tigers rebuilt. Well, they rebuilt, didn't they, with almost the entire salary cap. Almost the entire, because if you look at the players that he bought in, how much they spend, and squad size, I suspect, and I'm just guessing here, but I suspect that they spend almost as much as anyone else. I mean, they might not be quite up there, but they'll be a top 3 or 4 club, I'd guess, in their spending.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Whereas Exeter do not have those resources, and if you believe the rumours, they're £2 million under the cap, which is phenomenal.
Well, I don't believe rumours on the whole. I find that I'd like to see the numbers, but there is no doubt that Exeter have rebuilt. And that was partly an ageing team as well. It wasn't just a monetary thing, although they may well, I don't know, they may well be significant monetary pressures, but they quite clearly are in the middle still. Wonderful result for them, unfortunately for us. I say us, still my team of choice. For them at the weekend, but you look at the way they have pretty much turned over the whole of their starting 15, with the possible exception of Vermeulen, Henry Slade, and a couple of others occasionally, is, terrific player identification, absolutely terrific. Terrific recruitment, that's the different process. Identifying the players, one thing. Recruiting them is something completely different.
Yes, I've never thought about that. Of course it is.
And they've done well on both of those, and they've significantly shifted the age profile of their team. So that I haven't done the numbers, but I would imagine if you looked at their top, it's never look at the top 15. Look at their top 30, let's say, because that'll take out all the players nominally in the squad who aren't really going to play except in the league or Europe. Top 30, 32 maybe. I haven't done the numbers, but I would imagine they must be amongst the youngest top 32 in the country now.
I would say so, yeah. I would say so.
And they are already highly competitive. That is quite something. They've done it interestingly enough, in a different way to Leicester. Leicester's was very, I know a fair bit about this. I'll be a little bit careful. Leicester did it very much through data. Let's put it that way.
Yes, they did. Well,
valuation model.
I don't know how much you can say about this, but I can say a bit about it. They had the same guys who did the modelling. I think for Brentford, wasn't it? The XP stats.
Well, no, not. It's similar. It's similar. The XP stats, but no, it's their own model, and they haven't worked for Brentford, as far as I know. They're very clever guys. I know them pretty well, and they do a lot of stuff around team performance and actions on the field that actually end in scoring, as opposed to looking nice.
Yes,
and they're very interesting, and they also have translated the same data into valuations of players. And that was very, very influential on Steve Borthwick, and a lot of the work was done by a former player agent whose name escapes me. I apologise. I was Richard, wasn't it?
Richard Wilkes, yeah.
And Richard Wilkes. And it was very, very successful. And what they did was they aligned their player identification, valuation, and recruitment around a particular way of playing. And that is, of course, difficult to do and usually incredibly successful if you can pull it off. Exodus was done in a rather different way. They looked very. They were much more age driven. It appeared to me, and again, I don't know the details, but they looked to me as if they went out and through a combination of the Welsh regions, certain West Country public schools and Exeter University, as well as a few absolutely wonderful bits of ID from unusual places.
Yeah.
It was like a souped-up Steve Diamond type of approach in a particular age group. And they have, when we all know the players now, don't we? And they did benefit, as a lot of clubs did, from the demise of 3 of their fellow clubs.
They did.
So,
although I'm just trying to think about that. They've only taken
because it accelerated the rebuild. So they I think if they put their hand on heart would say, well, yeah, we had a bit of luck there because I think they were going to do it anyway. But I don't think they would have been able to do it quite as quickly.
I'm just trying to think who they got their hands on. Dan Frost would be one, but I've not seen him for a little while. Fisselau is the other. Is there someone else in there?
You've forgotten the most famous and the one who's accelerated the most. He was at Wasps.
Fisselau?
No.
There's another one. Is there another one?
Yeah, the England winger.
England winger. Oh, Feo Aboso.
Yeah.
Was he at Wasps? No, was he?
Mm.
I thought he was somewhere.
He was doing a medical degree at Aston University, from what I can remember.
I thought he was at Cardiff and went to.
And then went
Exeter.
To Wasps.
Oh, is that
he couldn't
right?
get a job. He couldn't get a place at Cardiff University to do medicine. One of the great misses of Welsh club rugby. Not entirely their fault.
Somebody needs to be fired for that.
Lack of flexibility at Cardiff University and Cardiff Medical School.
I mean, I would love to see how good the wingers are in Cardiff for the Cardiff Medics. I mean, they must be quite something.
So the rebuild thing. I'm not quite sure. It can take different forms. But it's a very and what you're trying to do, obviously, and what both of those clubs have done very, very well. It's one was very much driven about we need a younger and then I'm assuming cheaper squad at least, but it'll only be cheap for a while because if you're successful, of course, the valuation shift. And the other one was actually driven by we are not getting value out of our spend. We are overpaying for players who are not delivering. We need to replace them based on data with players who will have a bigger output.
Yes.
That sounds terribly inhumane almost, doesn't it? Or very, very analytic. But that was the Leicester rebuild. And both of them were successful. It's too early to say whether this year for Leicester was a blip and next year they will come storming back. They also benefited, and this is true for a lot of clubs over the years, and this is a sort of rebuild by not accident, but by fortune or good development. They had a golden generation at the Tigers.
Yeah.
That generation spanning, it's never a single year, but spanning 2 or 3 years from Van Poortvliet to Chesham to Martin. There's a few others as well in there.
Kelly would be up there.
And they all came together and they all came out of the academy in a relatively short period of time. And that doesn't half help. You could argue that Saracens talk about their golden generation, the sort of the Itoje, George, Good, etc., who they supplemented with a few guys in their early 20s, like the Vunipola brothers who came from other clubs. And if you can get that group, I mean, Harlequins still talk about their 207 golden generation of Rob Shaw and Robson and Jordan Turner-Hall and Lowe and all, and then added to it with Danny Kerr and people like that of the same age, and you can build a success around that.
Yes.
Sometimes you're not quite sure when it's coming, and you think we're putting all this money into the academy, we're investing in development and pathways. Geez, when's it gonna pay out? In a way, when's it gonna produce a crop altogether? Because that's what you need. Because the other thing is, if they grow up together, they tend to want to stay together. On the whole, then when it breaks up, it can break up quite quickly.
Yeah, and that might be the counterfactual, mightn't it, about Leicester Tigers when I say I don't like how they did it. I think they got rid of a lot of lads, which were unnecessary. I think the 2 points I'd make there is, well, by doing that, that's probably how they unearthed their next generation. I mean, they could have a next generation in their ranks right now, but they're never going to go through that process again.
Unless you're a really good recruiter or a real rugby age group nerd, it's really. I mean, for example, this bit's quite sad. For anyone with a romantic soul, such as myself, London Irish were just about to have theirs.
Well, the problem with the London Irish is
and actually, many. So were Wasps. And you look at the number of 20 to 24-year-olds who came out of that team, those two teams.
Yeah,
it was an extraordinary number. And I know people that, fans and administrators and coaches out of London Irish and Wasps. And London Irish, having been pillaged in their previous golden generation, principally by Bath, really felt this was their time. And then the wheels fell off, which only goes to show rebuilds or relaunches or development-led still has to be operating within a sustainable financial framework. And to be honest, you look at London Irish and you look at the number of incredibly talented youngsters they had, and you thought, what were you doing paying overs for some of the guys of 28, 29 and 30 that you brought in?
I completely agree with that.
Why did you do that?
Yeah,
there was no need. I know what they worried about, and you would point, I suppose, to the current situation at Newcastle. If your team is so weak and you don't have the top end and the leaders and the older players, those great youngsters are vulnerable to be picked off.
Yes.
Because, look, players stay at clubs for four main reasons. One, they want to win things, right? At least being with a chance of winning things. They don't necessarily have to win, but they want to be in with a shot. They're like fans, they want hope. Two, they stay for money. All right, let's not mess about. You can sometimes get players simply by paying overs. And sometimes that is the right thing to do for individual positions or whatever. You can't do it for the whole team and stay within the cap. But, it is another factor. Three, we've already mentioned it, to stay together. That does at times play a role. They want to stay with their mates. And
I think that's massive. It's absolutely massive.
And they'll take unders to do it at times to a degree. To a degree. And the fourth one is completely, and I had it in my head, but it's gone. But I'm sure it'll come pop back in at some stage.
There was another Premiership ex-CEO who I talked to quite frequently. We went for lunch, and he told me that he believed he had about a 30k swing before a player would leave. So he thought that,
yes, that's right. No, the cost of moving and the disruption and the risk of moving into a club you don't know, with a coach, however good he's been at selling you his vision, you don't actually know. And you don't really know the culture, although you'll ring up people you know in that club and say, is it any good? I mean, all the players do that. There is a premium to pay for that. I mean, if players don't tend to move unless one of those three, or if I can remember the fourth, that'd be even better, things happen, I'm only going to get paid significantly more money.
Yeah.
Am I in with a better chance of winning something? And do I hear good things about the people who are there?
Yeah.
And so it's not just an auction. It's not just a betting game. And yet the coach has an influence. Some players, go because they know the coach. So that's where you often see coaches signing players who they know. So, because every signing is a risk. Every single signing is a risk. You can do as much, you can get as much data as you like, you can watch as much vision as you like, you can talk to as many people as you like, and all you're doing is mitigating risk. The risk is still there because you don't actually know the person that well, and you also don't know whether he is going to integrate into the group you've already got.
Yeah, that is so true. That is so true. There's so much value in the Exeter style. We interview everybody, and I'm sure everyone does interview everyone, to be fair. But the process of getting to know the character,
I doubt that very much.
Really,
and certainly in the early days, you simply didn't have the resource.
Well, let me pitch you an idea. This is an idea which I had. This is, as far as I'm concerned, completely unique to me. Right? You might have heard it somewhere else, but I was listening to a player agent once saying, if you want to get into rugby, the way you do it is not knock on someone's door and say, I'm really passionate about rugby, or sport for that matter, please let me work for you, because everyone's passionate and everyone says they're going to work hard. Okay, fine. There's no real advantage there. I was thinking, well, hang on a minute. What do I do for a living? That's financial planning. So I had this idea, and you tell me if this is crazy. We know, as a rugby club, say, almost everything about the player. Or, if you're doing your job well, you know how fast they can run, how much they can lift. You probably have a good idea of the character. You probably know an awful lot about that player. But one of the things you don't know about the player is their financial situation and their financial goals. So if you started working with the player from a very young age to identify, well, what is it you want to get out of rugby by the time you leave? Is it unrealistic? Do you think you're going to be a millionaire? Do you think you're going to, what are the things you want to do? And it'll probably be something like, I want to get my own house, I want to leave with a head start, and I want to leave with the prospect of a new career. And if you think about it, that's probably about as good as you're going to get. Most players, if they leave with that, have done very, very well. Paid off house, new career.
They want to win things. And they also want to play at the highest level as often as possible.
Well, that is true, but purely from a financial point of view,
from a financial point of view, I think that's True, it gets stronger as they age.
Yep.
You don't get many 18-year-olds worrying about the money. You really don't.
Well, no, I mean, that's probably why they play, to be fair, for the amount that they get. So
yeah, well, they play because, like quite a few careers, why do people go into music? Why do people become artists? They don't fundamentally... They know there is a very small chance that they will earn an awful lot of money.
Yeah.
Right? But that's not what's driving them at the beginning. What's driving them at the beginning is a dream or a being less romantic, an aim that is at times, overpowering. It's interesting. We were having a discussion today because it's that time of year about list management and who to let go and who to sign and that kind of stuff. You're usually working at about 18 months to 24 months ahead. And, somebody said to me today when we were discussing whether or not, to let one or two people go, turned out they just find it too hard.
Oh, right.
I think that was very perceptive. They just find the lifestyle of being a rugby player too hard, too unrelenting, too never-ending, and too physically challenging.
I'm not surprised.
I think there's something in that. I do, for a small proportion of players.
Well, back to my pitch to you. So what will we do with all this financial data? Well, if we built up a picture of the player, I'm pretty confident we'd be able to remove a lot of the pressures from the salary cap. Because if this player's got realistic financial expectations and then you knew everything about him, you'd be looking for things like little tips as to, would this guy accept a lower contract than we otherwise would pay him? What would we be looking for? Kids in school, a wife with a career who doesn't want to leave,
there's
like healthy savings habits.
There's no doubt that those. It's interesting working here now because we're so far away from anywhere. Those factors are incredibly strong, but both ways. If you're coming to play here and you're previously based in, let's say, New Zealand or Australia, because that's where you probably will be, uprooting and moving to this country is a big, big shift.
Yes.
And similarly, leaving here and going to France, let's say, where the language is different, where the culture is completely different, where you're a long way from family, which is very important culturally to most Fijians, and you won't see them very often. Now, you weigh that up against the money and the opportunity and the type of club you're going to and all the rest of it. So, yes, finances and financial ambitions play a part, but at the end of the day, it's a part in a much more multifaceted decision on the behalf of the player. And some of the other things we've already touched on, enjoying the company of your teammates, enjoying the culture of the club that you're at, feeling your club's about to go on and have some success. I'm going to tell a story about one of your players you're not, or people in rugby you're not your favourite, as I understand it. And I might have told you this before, so I apologise if I told you this story before. Stop me if I have. But I remember, because players do sometimes stay for a lot less. Ugo Monya, his final contract with us, stayed for a lot less than Toulouse were offering him. In fact, I think our best offer wasn't even half of what they were offering. And he stayed because he wanted to win a premiership with his friends, basically.
That's pretty.
I'm sure there were other personal reasons that may have been impinging at the time, but that was a big part of it. So, look, it's multifaceted, it's complicated, every player's different, and the valuation margins you put on players, you've raised one just then about, if you think there's a discount for stability or is there a premium for risk? Yeah, there is. Of course, there always is. And the older they get and the more dependence that they have in terms of partners and children, maybe, that weight's higher.
Massively.
People do sneak, almost, snigger a bit. People say, "Oh, I want to go and play in France for, to experience a different culture." And everyone goes, "Yeah, mate." And the vastly increased salary. But actually, I do know players who have said, "I want to go and play somewhere abroad.
Oh, yeah.
I want
and it works.
that experience."
I mean, I don't think James Haskell would be nearly as successful as he is if he hadn't had that range of experiences. Now, I don't know if that is by accident or by design.
It's his character, isn't it? I think that's just, he's got this inquiring, let's have a go sort of character.
Yeah, and he can talk widely about so many types of rugby in so many different countries, and I think that gives him just this incredible edge.
For other people, that would be a nightmare. They'd hate it, and they wouldn't play well. So,
Yeah, what you want as a club owner is a nice, stable Sam Warburton who stays there for his entire career, and he's a nice boy and plays hard.
He'd rather play more games for you and less for his country, but that's a totally different.
I've spoken about this so many times, but yeah, I completely agree. And actually win something.
Well, yes.
Yeah. Well, we made remarkable progress in our original topic, which was branding.
Well, okay, let's go back to that then. Go on. What's your queries on that one?
So, we are debating hotly on EggChasers. You probably heard it, and even more so behind the scenes as to how do you go about branding a rugby club? And it's my contention that your branding should reflect your history, and that all of the other branding which has come subsequent to that, I always think of the Leicester Tigers, just generic Tigers head, which doesn't tell me anything about them, is basically just wrong. It's just wrong. And who are they appealing to? Now, you've been on the sharp end of this, trying to make clubs appeal to a new fan base. And actually, you were very fortunate as well, because the club you had was one of the few which is instantly distinguishable, probably in all of UK sport. But that was the question. Do you think that these rebrands make any difference? Is this a good way to spend your hard-earned money, which you've probably not earned, your owner's hard-earned money, when you've got games to win and people to pay?
If you mean by branding your club, which is a phrase I hate and would never use, by the way, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
The logo.
What's a better phrase for it? What would you prefer to use?
Identity.
Okay. Re-identifying.
How are we? What is our identity as a club, and how is that represented? And it's and if you never change, so I'm not quite as extreme in this one as you, but if you never change the look and the feel of your kit and your website and your ground and all the rest of it, it does undoubtedly over time look tired and outdated as opposed to classic.
Yes.
Okay? Nothing wrong with classic. You're happy to be classic. You really do not want to be look outdated. And if you're not careful, if you lean too much into the tradition and that's the way it's always looked, you are running the risk of looking outdated.
Yes.
Having said that,
Life is full of awesome what-ifs, and some not so much, like unexpected medical costs. That's why United Healthcare provides Health Protector Guard fixed indemnity insurance plans to supplement your primary plan and help manage out-of-pocket costs. Learn more at UH1.com.
Many of us have those stubborn pounds that seem impossible to lose, no matter how good we eat or how hard we work out. My solution is PlushCare. PlushCare is a leading telehealth provider with doctors who are there for you day and night to partner with you in your weight loss journey. They can prescribe FDA-approved weight loss medications like Wegovy and Zepbound for those who qualify. Plus, they accept most insurance plans. To get started, visit plushcare.com/weight loss. That's plushcare.com/weight loss.
Having said that, anyone who's worked with them will tell you my eyes glaze over a bit when we are talking about, well, we need a complete rebrand. Now, I think very occasionally that's probably true in the sense that if you don't have any kind of brand guidelines, then it can look a bit of a mess. I mean, I remember the first 8 or 9 years at Quins, we didn't do any of that stuff. There were far more important things to do. But it is fair to say, and it was recognised internally, even by me, that by the end of that, it was looking a bit of a dog's breakfast.
Yeah, was it you?
We had all kinds of different things going on, and it did need a real tidy up.
Now, it must have been you that told me this, because no one else would know this. But did you have something... I remember it just being ridiculous. You had the posts painted blue or something.
No. I had the post painted 6 colours.
Yeah, but you originally had...
That is an interesting... I did, yes. That isn't in my very first 3 weeks, I think. That was an interesting one about identity, though.
Yeah.
That I think is important. So the problem there was, and this is going back a long time ago, you'll never even remember the Stoop as it was then, and very few people, you've got to be around for at least 25 years to remember it. But it didn't look like Quins ground at all. It was blue. All the seats were blue. Most of the hoardings were blue because NEC were the dominant part in there. Corporate colours were blue and white. And apart from one very nice stand, there was only one very nice stand at the Stoop at that time. It's the only bit that still stands now. Was in the 6 colours and looked great, but everything else was blue. So we did a whole load of, in fact, you make the ground look like it belongs to us. Now, if you want to call that branding, then fine, be my guest. But it was much more about, my God, we've got to at least shriek about who we are when people are kind enough to spend their money in coming to watch us. But in terms of that, and I've got another one from Quins, which I think is really interesting. We spent quite a lot of time asking people questions in order to grow our audience. That seems pretty sensible.
Yeah.
Why don't we just ask people about what they think about us? And I remember one we did, and Tony Copsey drove it. It was our MD at the time, and the first 3 questions were incredibly informative. We almost didn't look at the rest of the answers. We just worked with the first 3. We could have saved a lot of money without asking all the other ones. One was, have you heard of us? Well, funny enough, most people had. We said, have you heard of Harlequins? Yes. Excellent. Good start. Brand recognition, they call that. Mm-hmm. Number 2, do you know what we are? They said, and funnily enough, in our area, and a bit more widely, and we weren't very concerned about more widely, because why would we be? People aren't going to travel more than about an hour. So forget anything beyond an hour, they're not coming. It's too far. There'll be the odd exceptional outlier, of course, but not statistically significant. Yes, they did. That was encouraging too. They knew we were a rugby club. Fantastic. So we're doing well so far, right? They know our name and they know we're a rugby club. And then question 3, we fell off a cliff. Do you know where we are?
That's a great question.
Didn't have a clue.
Do you know, I can identify with this 100%. Bearing in mind, I grew up rugby mad. Absolutely rugby mad. I had no idea Sale Sharks were in Manchester. I mean, I had no... Until one day I saw a map of where the Premiership teams were.
Did you know that Sale was in Manchester?
No idea.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's just...
From Wales, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, unless you're from... I don't think people from Liverpool know that Sale is in Manchester. No idea.
No, probably not. So the problem then is, if you are an audience-based business, which all professional sports clubs are, part of the revenue is people coming to watch and paying money, right? And not entirely, because there's lots of other revenue, there's 4 or 5 other revenue streams. But if people don't know where you are, how are they going to make a decision about whether or not to go?
Yeah.
And so we did a lot of work, and we even did a lot of work then on making it clear that we were based in Twickenham.
Yeah, I was about to ask that. Is that why it is now always the Twickenham Stoop?
Correct. And we couldn't bring ourselves to change the name. Harlequins was such an iconic name, and it had been around since 1876, and we just did not. We certainly didn't feel comfortable with London Harlequins because London's too big.
Yeah.
What about Twickenham Harlequins? And we thought about it, and we ummed and ahed, and in the end, we just said, no, it's just a bridge too far, really. It just doesn't feel. We just didn't feel comfortable with it.
Yeah,
but we did change the name of the ground and it may sound a very small thing, from the Stoop Memorial Ground after Adrian Stoop to the Twickenham Stoop. And most people in the media particularly went with it.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of work with people who reported saying, can you please use Twickenham Stoop? And when you say from the people still use the Stoop, of course. And we're outside, and a lot of the stuff on the roadsides up the A3 was the Twickenham Stoop. And we did a lot of work. We did quite a few campaigns around how to get to Twickenham. And it sounds ridiculous, really, but it was quite clear that, and we didn't care about people who lived a long way away, because it was about people who live within travelling time.
Yes.
And really, therefore, the train line was really important. So we did a lot of work around the train line, north and south, coming into Twickenham, because, and then we did surveys. How long did people drive, and where did they drive from, and hotspots and all that kind of stuff. So on the basis that if you've already got some interest in that area or suburb or commuter town, you can build on it.
Yeah.
So is that branding? I suppose it is. I'd say it's marketing and about a sense of identity. And I heard the piece about, the idea, and I'm sure nobody really thinks this, do they, that we'll change the logo and that will appeal to a brand new audience. I've never believed.
I think there are people that do believe this. I mean, I think there are people who are bereft of ideas, but I think they do.
I don't believe, however, but at the same time, I do agree that you need to make sure you don't look outdated. If you never change, look, one of the great, I'm such a sports geek, but there's some great websites out there that show the changing logos of clubs over 50 years. It's brilliant. I love all that stuff. And I think you can tap into that. I mean, and sometimes, retro jerseys fans do it themselves. Remember that it can become symbolic. So, it's not that brand is unimportant or imagery is unimportant. Look at the green and yellow scarves of Man United fans.
Absolutely.
Blazer protest. That was a throwback, wasn't it, to Newton Heath, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, and that is exactly right. But that is...
No, I haven't.
But as a club, that's your worst nightmare possible, isn't it? Because non-branded...
And also, it's about, what does that say? It says, this is why symbols are important, and logos and colours are important.
Yeah, they are.
It says, you have lost your way. You are no longer the club that we were, and we are telling you this because we are wearing our original colours.
But you're not getting a cut of.
You could not be more damning. I mean, I'm a Cardiff boy, and when the Malaysian owners took over Cardiff City, known for generations as the Bluebirds, they changed the shirts to red because it's lucky colour. And the fans absolutely hated it. So, if you're trying to grow your business, and I understand, you're trying to grow your audience. Or you can lose people by making some really bad decisions in this area. I'm not sure you gain too many unless you back it up with some seriously sensible activity that ties it in together.
Well,
So, I remember for a long time, and it was a little bit of trying to drive rivalry and whatever. We tried to position ourselves as the London club, right? Based in Twickenham, but the London. So we put the London skyline across the quarters for a year or two.
I remember that one. That was a kit launch. That was a kit launch done by... Who was that?
Kit launch Tower London and all that kind of blah. Yeah.
Yeah, but was that not the kit launch done by Jordan Turner Hall up the Shard?
I think we might have done. Oh, we did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But did that really move the dial? Not really. And then we did a campaign which I thought was much more successful around Harlequin's Heartland, which was to try, using the data we had, to capture a geographical area centred on Twickenham, but with other suburbs and areas where we had a real presence. And then we ran a load of summer activities in that area.
Yeah.
And we did a marketing plan around it and all the rest of it. And I think we might even, it's a long time ago, we might even have started to say, if you live in the Heartland, here's a 10% discount on your season ticket or something. I can't.
They had some scandal at Charlton Football Club. I could be making this up, but weren't they busing people in from as far afield as Ipswich or somewhere? Well,
Charlton is a really interesting team, although on hard times at the moment.
Yeah.
Because their marketplace and why they always had the potential, and they were in Premiership for a while, to have a big audience is that there's no other. Well, I'm going to offend someone now. There's no other significant football club between them and the Channel.
Is it not?
Well, I mean, Gillingham's almost level with Charlton, but if you go south to Dover and down the arterial roads, there's nothing. The nearest club for all of those people is Charlton Athletic. And then you go round and the next one is Crystal Palace. And then you go round. And actually, there's a great bit of, and we use this again at Quins, and this is more about, growing crowds. Look at your arterial routes.
Right.
Look at your bus routes, your train routes, and your roads. Because it's not how far people live away from you, it's how long it takes them to get there.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. So in North Wales, hilariously, I was expected to support the Scarlets. It would be quicker for me, on some days to go and watch Racing 92. Right, I could drive to the airport, get on a plane, and watch Racing 92 in the time it takes me to get to Llanelli from Llandudno.
Which is, is a particularly rural problem. I mean, it's interesting. You look at Norwich City, for example, and one of the best ever community-based ticketing marketing branding campaigns I've ever seen went on for a long, was Norwich City, the Canaries. And you look at a map, so much of this is driven by maps and geography and travel lines. You look at it, and Norwich is in the middle of quite a very rural area.
Yeah, right.
It's all circular. And you look out, it's like they're in the middle, like of spokes of a wheel, all going out to these quite small, not very well populated, but numerous villages and small towns of Norfolk. And they exploited that beautifully. They realised they were not Norwich, they were really Norfolk.
Yeah, yeah.
And as a result, did an awful lot of work, really good work, in terms of community visits and community activities and school-based stuff, all about driving affinity to the club from the area which it represented. Which, flipping back to Quins, that was why it was such a big part of what we were trying to do, to get more people to understand where we were. Because if people don't know where you are, how the hell do you know where your market is? If they don't know you, they're not part of your market. So a lot of it lies around looking at things like like we said, the arterial routes.
Yeah.
And how do people get there, and how many people walk, and how many people drive, and how many people get the train, and all these things. If you're trying to encourage people to come and watch you, there's a whole lot of other stuff. It's price, there's ease of purchase, there's the match day experience, there's a whole pile of stuff. And it all has a role. And the identity sits in the middle and acts as a sort of almost like a magnet. And you have to do all the other things too, but they have to be consistent with the identity you've chosen to create for yourself. And so it's not just the logo and the look and the feel, although if you get that wrong, you can do a lot of damage.
Well, you said before aged rather than classic, and I agree with that. I'll tell you where I think there's a lot of aging brands or aged brands, which is ridiculous because they're some of the oldest clubs in the country, but in the Super League. Like, if you look at some of their branding, when they've changed their names from something to something, or they've got some stupid cartoon on their jersey where it used to be a crest, and you think about the towns that play rugby league and the history that they have, they've got an incredible amount of aging identities.
Well, it's fascinating because you one of the problems the British have, and I think this is partly to do with our sort of, I don't know, it's something cultural, it's something in our Britishness. In lots of other countries, they take away the choice from the individual clubs. So, for example, take the NRL in Australia, which is by a distance the most successful rugby or competition in the world, club rugby competition in the world by a mile.
Yeah,
way bigger than the top 14, which is the second. But you look at them, and they don't give the clubs a choice to have the name. Yeah, you can stick Canberra, but you're the Raiders. You can put Melbourne, but you're the Storm. And you can be in from Manly, but you're the Sea Eagles.
Wow, I did not know this.
And when you look at the table, sometimes they use the whole name, and the club may use the whole name itself. So, St. George Illawarra Dragons. Now that's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah.
They're the Dragons. Okay, that's what everybody calls them, right? Sometimes they call, and the Broncos, everyone knows that's Brisbane.
Yes.
And the Sharks, everyone knows that's Cronulla. You don't have a choice. Then you look at what we do, and we think, oh, that's a good idea because it's quite, and it's true. Marketing's about appealing to lots of different sectors at times. So, the Sharks, quite appealing for blah, blah, blah. But they all do it, right? Look at the NFL, right? You don't have a choice.
Yeah, but they are...
There are no... You're the Packers. Yeah, you're from Green Bay. You're the Bears. Yeah, we're from Chicago. But you're the Bears, and you're the 49ers, and you're the Jets. Right? So we have some clubs called the Bears, right? We have some clubs called Harlequins. No name. No place in the title, just Quins. Right? Wasps. Look at them. Were they Wasps or were they London Wasps? And then when they moved, people said it should be called Wickham Wasps.
Yeah.
And then when you get back, this... And it's interesting because franchises in America, for instance, the Browns have moved around, but they're still the Browns. But they change where the name at the front when the franchise moves. Now, I'm not suggesting they necessarily do that and have a franchise system. What I am saying is if you want to promote the league and the clubs within it, there's got to be a degree of consistency. And the clubs have to give up, if you like, some of their independence.
Yeah.
So they have to follow guidelines. They have to say, well, we can't all do our own thing and end up all doing different things. And what suits one will suit one better than the other. But actually, we're about growing the collective because a rising tide floats all boats. And if we all go off and do nothing coordinated, the growth won't be as strong or as consistent. And we've never quite grasped that, I don't think. We're really strong in the UK on heritage. We're really strong on the history and the tradition and, if you like, the authenticity. We're very poor at coming to a collective position and all delivering it.
Yeah, I just find British
that's
people...
That's just the way we are,
well, I think we find... If you just called a rugby team tomorrow the Warriors, we're like, what does that even mean? And maybe there are advantages of calling...
But the newest franchise in the NRL is just called the Dolphins.
Is it really?
They're not called anything. They're just called the Dolphins. And they're from Brisbane, right? They're not called the Brisbane Dolphins.
Yeah.
They're just called the Dolphins, and that's what everybody calls them because that's their name. And as time goes on, it's been interesting to watch over time. Well, actually, the Bristol thing's quite interesting.
Bristol's not failed. I thought it would have failed. It hasn't failed. I think it's been quite successful, actually.
And actually, the Chiefs has been, leaving aside all the nonsense, the Chiefs has been quite successful, right? Certainly to the degree that they weren't prepared to just abandon it under the pressure they came under. They did what they did, rightly or wrongly, but they didn't abandon the idea of having a branding name to go alongside the location.
Yeah, I mean, just on the Chiefs thing.
We classically don't do it, do we? So some do, but some don't. And, London Irish never did.
No. Well, just back to the Chiefs thing. I mean, it tells you what a good club they are, that they did what they did with absolutely horrendous branding. Now, I fully supported them keeping the branding, but if you're going to start from scratch, it was an absolutely dreadful idea from the very beginning. I mean, I don't know. It's the sort of branding that I'd be dead against. If someone came into me and said, do this.
What tends to happen with those naming things, and this is, again, a very, don't overstate the case, this is a small part of a very broad suite of things that need to do to engender growth. But what tends to happen is that clubs who've never had it tend to look around the world and say, well, works all right in Kansas City, let's try it in Exeter. Or, it's true. Or,
it is true. It's absolutely true.
Those Natal boys seem to have got it going. Let's put it in. Let's do. I mean, that's what they always say about Sale. Why did Sale choose Shark?
Do you know the story to this?
I don't know. But it's fascinated me. It always has. You know it.
Of course I know it. So the Sharks came to their name because it was the choice of the players' wives who loved the play West Side Story, which is why you get Sale Jets.
Jets.
Yeah, Sale Sharks. Yeah, and still is. So Sale Jets and Sale Sharks still, well, obviously Sharks still exist, Jets still exist. The players' wives wanted those names.
Well, I hate to be critical of Sale Sharks, but that is, I've always thought, why? Well, why are they called Sale Sharks? It doesn't, well, mind you, why are they called Exeter Chiefs? I mean, it is... Often when people look around, they look around the world and think, well, I like that. And often it's alliterative, Worcester Warriors and the Bristol Bears. And, it's, that sort of works. But, yeah, it's like it didn't feel like it was given an awful lot of thought. And now I know that it wasn't.
It's so true.
But it's, I mean, my bigger point is... that too much... I mean, I think the Welsh regions were a really interesting one, actually.
Yes, they are.
And here I think the names might have mattered back in the day, and now you probably... That ship has probably sailed. But when in classic British compromise, it was a case of getting half pregnant. So you got 4 teams coming out of 4 areas with 4 dominant clubs.
Yeah.
So you've got Shrewsbury, Swansea, Cardiff and Newport. But they were taking regions with other clubs that at times had been as strong or stronger. So Newport had Pontypool, Ebbw Vale, and Cardiff had Pontypridd and Bridge and the Swansea, the Ospreys had...
Swansea Neath.
End and Neath and Swan. Right. So what do? Do you get one consistent model or policy that says, right, guys, you're going to have a 2-name word. You're going to have one name is geographic. So, or something that you can't, but it can't be the name of an individual club because you're not just representing that club now, you're representing a wider area. But they didn't, did they? They fudged it. They actually called themselves the Scarlets, which they called themselves forever.
Yeah.
So there was no change there. The one that had a real go at trying to be a genuinely new entity was the Ospreys.
Who, in fairness, I think their branding, I mean, I hate their branding, but it definitely speaks to their demographic, and they're the ones that have embraced it the most.
And they they did some clever things with it. You are now entering Australia.
Yeah.
I thought that was really clever back in the day, and whatever. Cardiff called themselves the Blues. Well, that was a bit like the Scarlets, wasn't it? You couldn't get any closer. Oh, it's all right, because that's what Auckland called themselves. So we're all right. And Newport went down the sort of another perfectly good route if everyone else had called themselves after mythical animals. If it'd all been animals. I mean, the Cardiff, it couldn't be Cardiff. I mean, the sort of the Western Wolves, that's fancy. Right, the Osprey, the something Ospreys, and they all did the same thing.
That actually might have moved a bit better.
You sort of would have, but we didn't. We fudged it because we didn't want to offend people.
Well, no, they didn't want to offend some people. They were quite happy to offend lots of other people.
Well, all right. In the end, they didn't put it. No, put it a different way. It's not about offending people. They didn't have the courage of their convictions. It was such a struggle to get it over the line anyway.
Yeah.
And they started with 5, if you remember. And then
they did, the Warriors. Was it? Yeah, Celtic Warriors?
The Celtic Warriors is the one you're after.
Yeah.
And it never quite... It was hobbled right out the gate. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Either call them Cardiff, Newport, Swansea and Slashley, right, and then put something on them to represent the region more, or go the whole hog and give them new names representing the whole area and get people and put them in new colours.
Yes.
Because people, it's like flags. We invest a huge amount of meaning and values and a lot of other things, culture, in a flag.
Don't we just?
And we do.
Yeah.
And why do we do it? Well, we all know the reasons why we do that. It's for people to rally around, hence the phrase. It's to symbolise things. It's to give a sense of identity. And sports clubs are just the same. We started as saying, I don't like branding. I like the word identity. And I do. But the identity's got to represent something, and those are often represented in the form of colours and names and logos.
Yeah, and also it does seem to go one way, this branding, doesn't it? It always seems to be, well, if we're going to brand, we need something which will stick out, but actually is very superficial. So I've never seen a bit of branding of late which is new, which is anything more than a wolf or a bear. You couldn't just lift... You gave the example, didn't you, of Exeter Chiefs saying, oh, works in Kansas, we'll work here. You couldn't do that with, say, I don't know, aping the Warrington Wolves by saying we're going to have a primrose jersey because it appealed to early turn of the century suffragettes who happen to be the daughters of a steelworks or something. It just isn't going to work.
But rugby league is the same. It's a British thing, not a rugby union thing. So have you got, the Wigan Warriors, the Warrington Wolves, the Leeds Rhinos is the one that worked pretty well.
Yeah, it does work, actually. Because they are synonymous with rhinos now, aren't they? There's no...
and the crowd chant it and all the rest of it. Rhinos. Anyway, but what about St Helens? They've always been called St Helens.
Yeah, and rightly so.
Right? And, well, maybe, but... Do you not see the point I'm making?
Yeah.
You're either all in...
Yeah. You've got to make that commitment. I think you can... it's got to be something, hasn't it, with how successful has that brand been previously? Because if you Exeter Chiefs, let's be honest, Exeter were not successful before Chiefs. So it doesn't really matter what came before. You can call them Chiefs. Whereas if you had...
Look at the ones that talk, right? So let's go to the probably... Well, and then we got that funny thing in rugby union. We got Saracens. It was traditionally the London clubs, wasn't it? Saracens, Harlequins, Wasps, who nobody knew where they were from.
Yeah.
Right? They just, some bloke, you know, the old story is how Harlequins and Wasps were formed when somebody opened a dictionary at the letter H and, we'll be Harlequins. And then their other lot one up and called themselves Wasps. And that was it. And then it carried on for 150 years. I mean, nobody worries about Leicester Tigers, do they? Because they've been Leicester Tigers for so long.
There's a good story behind Leicester Tigers. And I can't remember if it's the regiment. I think it's the regimental animal of the army unit that set up Leicester Tigers. It's something like that. I mean, yeah.
I've never known why they called themselves the Tigers. I just know it happened a long, long time ago.
It did, and they've stuck with it. And I love that. Absolutely love it.
Okay, right.
Shall we leave it there, Mark? Because we've been...
I think so. I think we touched on the whole how do you go crowds, and maybe we might sort of do that a little bit more next time, because, you know, it's interesting to look at clubs that have been able to do it and clubs that haven't, and what are the differences? Is it the market size? Is it the match day experience? Is it the stadium? Is it the ticket price? And, you know, it's fascinating. Is it simply cultural which I think it is largely, not entirely, is it the penetration of the sport into the local area?
Yeah.
You know, and actually it's got very little to do with a lot of the other factors. There just isn't a big rugby market. There's a lot of different things to unpick there.
Yeah, excellent. Right, well, that was phenomenal. We will be back in 3 weeks because we've done this a week later. So we'll be back in 3 weeks.
And he said on the other podcast, because I was travelling, it wasn't that because I was travelling.
I thought you were travelling.
I was, but we didn't do it because you were otherwise engaged and couldn't get out.
I was engaged on Wednesday. You were travelling on Tuesday.
Well, yes, that is true.
That is true.
Yeah, but the only one I'm going to mention. Anyway, I don't want our listener to feel I'm not committed. That's what it is.
Exactly. All right, Mark. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, take care, JB. All the best.
See you, mate.
Selling a little or a lot? Shopify helps you do your thing however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit a million orders stage. Shopify is there to help you grow. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Get a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/work. Shopify.com/work.
Even when we're on a budget, we still deserve nice things. Quince is a place to scoop up stunning high-end goods for 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They have buttery soft cashmere sweaters starting at $50, luxurious Italian leather bags, and so much more. Plus, Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing. Get the high-end goods you'll love without the high price tag with Quince. Go to quince.com/style for free shipping and 365-day returns.
Pulling up to Mickey D's just for drinks? Oh yeah, that's me. Nothing extra, just perfection and a straw. Coming in hot for the coldest cups on the block. Because there are drinks. Then there are drinks from McDonald's.
Ever combine an ice-cold frozen Coke with piping hot fries? Try frozen drinks any size for $1.49. Prices and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.